Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Good evening.
Good evening.
This may be one of my more meandering talks, so bear with me. Tomorrow night is the winter solstice, the shortest night of the year. And something that catches my attention. Let's put it that way. I don't like the dark. I don't like the cold. It hasn't been that cold, but it's been dark. So I notice this dark, and I notice the change of the seasons. I don't notice summer solstice so much because I'm in the middle of gardening season and I'm busy gardening. At the winter solstice, I'm really well aware that the plants are all sleeping. They're all having their downtime, their rest. And I am patiently trying not to ask them to hurry up. They need their rest. I need my rest. What I've noticed after looking back over talks, both from Wy'East and Dharma Rain, it seems almost every single year I do a talk in December that touches on the solstice. So I at least wanted to put a little pin in the solstice for tonight's talk. But what I want to bring forward is a little snippet from Hongzhi. This is from Cultivating the Empty Field. And perhaps it's in relation to the solstice that I chose this piece because it's called 10 Billion Illuminating Spirits. And I'm guessing I needed that light. Hongzhi was a Zen master in China in the 12th century. He's not directly in our lineage, but is a Dharma brother of one of our lineage ancestors. So very close. And he was very influential in developing what became Shikantaza. In his works, he'll refer to it as silent illumination. But it's this objectless meditation that tends to be the focus of Soto Zen. So 10 billion illuminating spirits. The way wanders in the empty middle of the circle, reaching the vacancy where appearances are forgotten. The pure ultimate self blazes brilliantly, simply from inherent illumination. Facing the boundary of the object world without yet creating the sense gates, realize the subtlety of how to eliminate the effects of the swirling flow of arising and extinction. Rely only on the source of creation. If you feel a shadow of a hair's gap, nothing will be received. Just experience and respond appropriately. From this singular impact, many thousands of roads open, and all things are preeminent. With this unification, I radiantly speak the Dharma. The self divides into 10 billion distinct illuminating spirits. Distinguish these without falling into names and classifications, and accord fully without effort. The mirror is clear and magnanimous. The valley is empty, but echoes. From the beginning, unbound by seeing or hearing, the genuine self romps and plays in samadhi without obstruction. When acted like this, how could it not be beneficial? So that is Hongzhi's 10 billion illuminating spirits. And for those of you who are familiar with Dogen and reading Dogen, Hongzhi was a big influence on Dogen. So some of those phrases you'll hear or may sound familiar to you. But it's said of Hongzhi that his teachings encompass both the whole of the practice and serve as meditation instruction and a poetic view of speaking from that sense of awakening itself. The way wanders in the empty middle of the circle, reaching the vacancy where appearances are forgotten. What a beautiful reference to sitting in meditation in complete stillness. The pure ultimate self blazes, brilliant simply from inherent illumination. And I would ask you, what is this inherent illumination? What comes up for you when hearing those words? Often in Buddhism, when we talk about impermanence, we speak about how nothing is inherently existent. And yet here we have brilliant simply from inherent illumination. Facing the boundary of the object world without yet creating the sense gates, deep, deep in meditation. Realize the subtlety of how to eliminate the effects of the swirling flow of arising and in extinction. Being born, dying away, having a self, losing a self, creating a body, interacting with objects, objects of the senses, objects of the mind. Rely only on the source of creation. Do you know what that is? Have you felt that spark, that surge, that energy? If you feel a shadow of a hair's gap, nothing will be received. That's a little hint and a nudge. Stay in meditation when the thinking mind engages. You've lost it. When that noticing arises, it's gone. Just experience and respond appropriately. A gentle nudge to not get hung up on whether or not you lose that thread of meditation. Just come back to it. Notice when it's shifted, come back, return to stillness. Or as Kyogen would say, come back to zero. From this singular impact, many thousands of roads open and all things are preeminent. Anything is possible. Everything is possible. With this unification, I radiantly speak the Dharma. Here, Hongzhi is celebrating practice, celebrating life, celebrating stability and trust. His trust in the Dharma that has come through his own experience. The self divides into 10 billion distinct illuminating spirits. I love that line. We can think of those 10 billion illuminating spirits as the beings in the world, or the selves that create this particular being, those momentary fragments that arise and fall away. The self who is here now, the self that was getting up this morning, the self that will be here tomorrow. Many of those are now imaginary or memory. But each moment has itself, each moment has its experience, each moment has its unfolding. Distinguish these without falling into names and classifications and accord fully without effort. Can we notice without naming? Can we notice without story? In Japanese Zen, we might reflect on this and say, and the teaching of the three nens. Can we stay in first nen? So the third nen being story, the second nen being name, label. First nen being experience. Can we just stay with noticing? Can we notice and distinguish without falling into concepts, narratives. And I love that accord fully without effort, because there is a place where all things are effortless. There is a time when no effort is needed, a place of completeness, a time of wholeness. The mirror is clear and magnanimous. So many references here to light, clarity, reflection, illumination. The mirror is not only clear, but also magnanimous. There is a generosity here. There is a greatness. There is a warmth that comes through in Hongzhi's words. The valley is empty but echoes. From the beginning, unbound by seeing and hearing, the genuine self romps and plays in samadhi without obstruction. What is this experience that arises without dependence on the eyes and the ears? What is this experience that can roam and play in samadhi, that can enjoy, that can delight? Romps and plays in samadhi without obstruction. When enacted like this, how could it not be beneficial? That last question that he leaves us with all of his references to lightness, brightness, play, warmth, how could it not be beneficial? With this writing, with this essay, Hongzhi encourages us towards practice. Practice in meditation, practice in upaya, right action. How do we go about our world? Anchored in meditation, that spontaneity, that joy, that energy can be reflected outward, can touch those around us. But often, somehow, we muck it up, right? I do sometimes. When enacted like this, how could it not be beneficial? I can think of so many ways. I trip, I fall, I make mistakes, I say the wrong thing. Losing that sense of groundedness, losing that sense of meditation, anxiety arises, self-consciousness arises. Dismay over having to make decisions arises. Oh, what am I going to have for dinner? Such a little question can cause such consternation. Am I going to have this or that? Should I stay in or should I go out? Hongzhi's meditation is not limited to a sitting cushion in a zendo. Hongzhi Shikantaza is not limited to composing the body in a particular way, a particular form. His meditation instructions tend to speak of a quality of mind that is accessible, that through practice and engagement we can find, that we can touch. And once touched, we know that we can find it again. This aspect of vastness, this aspect of brightness, this aspect of illumination. And like all experiences, finding that vastness, that brightness, that illumination is noticeable, and it will fade. We'll lose it. We'll get up. We'll get up off the cushion. We'll lose our focus. Somebody will ask us a question. The mind will trip back into narrative and story and decision making. But that's okay. That's okay. In Buddhism, we have impermanence as a strength, as a benefit. All things change. This is said to be one of the three marks of existence and one of the sources of suffering. All things change. We want them to stay the same. We want the good things to stay. We want the bad things to not arrive. We want to stay close to people we love. We don't want to be near people we don't like. We want things to be a particular way. But through practice, that impermanence as a source of suffering also becomes impermanence as a source of joy, impermanence as a source of relief. Oh, things will change. I know this. Yes, it's good that the bad things we experience will change. I'm all for that. And that friends we see will be parted with. That's okay too. In recognizing impermanence, working with impermanence, we learn how to pick things up and put things down. We learn that it's okay to put things down or to step away from, because things will continue to change. And that stepping away from is not necessarily forever. Even after a death, there is still relating to memories of that person. I don't know if Kyoki's name was read on the merit list tonight. I hope it was. But a Zen teacher named Kyoki Roberts passed away early yesterday morning. She was well known to my teacher's generation. And I remember her, and I remember her being at the Zen Center when she was talking with Kyogen, having meetings. And so this aspect of impermanence in the form of death has been on my mind today. And even in that, knowing that she has died, there has been such an outpouring of stories and memories from Zen teachers across the country. And it has been so sweet to hear that, to read that, reading mostly. These are all emails. But that relationship still stays even after death. I still have a relationship with Kyoki that is based on my memories of her kindness to me right after Kyogen's death. I have relationships with Kyoki based on my memories of serving her tea when I was a novice, and she was at the temple for a board meeting. So that's why I said that, for the most part, people don't disappear forever. We still have that relationship, those memories, those connections. That was a little side jog. Hongzhi's instructions for practice, the way he writes, the way he encourages, the way he speaks with warmth and play. There's a coziness to his words. I am drawn to in the winter. I'm drawn to Hongzhi in the dark. I'm drawn to Hongzhi when it's cold and silent. In these times where the nights are long and it seems like there is a stillness, a quietness. And You may or may not be experiencing a stillness or a quietness. December is a time full of holidays, activities, meetings, presents. But for many, it's a time of stillness and silence. It's a time when ceremony and ritual can be poignant, when simply lighting a candle can change the mood in a room. And for us Zen people, we had our Rohatsu the beginning of December, the week of sitting for those who were at Dharma Rain, and a longer night of sitting for those at Wy'East. We did some extra zazen. And with that, we commemorated Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment, his long night of sitting, his night of being in stillness, of watching the mind, of seeing what happens, of being pulled out of meditation again and again by distractions, and finally seeing through his obstacles, finally gaining a sense of awakening, enlightenment, and freedom. And we'll probably have another ceremony at New Year's as a way to mark a transition between an old year and a new year, to mark in a somewhat arbitrary way the mistakes we make in practice and the vows we make in practice as we celebrate New Year's. A way to reflect, a way to contemplate. So with that, I will just say that's my talk for this evening, and I'm happy to have questions or comments or discussion, or if you want me to read a section of Hongzhi again, I can repeat some of that. And thank you for your kind attention.
How do you spell the name?
Hongzhi. And what I was reading from is Cultivating the Empty Field, translated by Taigen Dan Layton.
Jyoshin, could we hear the passage again?
Sure. "10 billion illuminating spirits. The way wanders in the empty middle of the circle, reaching the vacancy where appearances are forgotten. The pure ultimate self blazes, brilliant simply from inherent illumination. Facing the boundary of the object world without yet creating the sense gates, realize the subtlety of how to eliminate the effects of the swirling flow of arising and extinction. Rely only on the source of creation. If you feel a shadow of a hair's gap, nothing will be received. Just experience and respond appropriately. From this singular impact, many thousands of roads open, and all things are preeminent. With this unification, I radiantly speak the Dharma. The self divides into 10 billion distinct illuminating spirits. Distinguish these without falling into names and classifications, and accord fully without effort. The mirror is clear and magnanimous. The valley is empty, but echoes. From the beginning, unbound by seeing or hearing, the genuine self romps and plays in samadhi without obstruction. When enacted like this, how could it not be beneficial?
Just experience and respond appropriately. That makes it sound pretty easy.
He's good at making it sound pretty easy. Do you think it's pretty easy, Deiko?
It's an aspiration for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't always find it that simple.
Me neither.
The line about the self breaking into a billion pieces.
Mm-hmm. The self divides into 10 billion distinct illuminating spirits.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that happens to me hourly. I love that.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful reminder not to, at least for me, not to get caught up in the I, me, mine.
Mm.
Who's that I? Which one of those 10 billion spirits?
Exactly.
Okay,
Appearing
talk
in
about
and out.
the phrase when enacted by like this.
Mm,
It refers to
or,
all the verbs that came before, right?
yeah. When it acted just as he's describing it. Knowing that descriptions are limiting. One thing I love about Hongzhi is like so much of how he's translated is done beautifully poetic, and it points us in a particular direction without defining or trying to explain. And it is such a celebration of practice. What is your take on when enacted like this, Shokai?
Um, let's see. Can you behave like a truly enlightened person?
Mm,
I go back to the empty circle,
mm-hmm.
but that's not a verb that I'm doing. That's something well, maybe it is
Mm-hmm.
enacting.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me want to go back and read it again and again. That's what it does.
Yeah.
And I like the poetry, and I noticed that this is the same Lynn Dayton that translated our Grass Roof Hermitage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has if I remember correctly, he's got a place in Chicago, Ancient Dragon Gate, and he's done several translations. And I would say being is doing. It's a verb too.
The line that's really speaking to me tonight is the rely on the source of creation.
Mm,
I like the implication that, well, like there's a lot of things that I could be relying on and a lot of options. And it's like, choose to rely on this one if you can feel it out. And we were having a conversation before meditation about Buddha nature and like how it manifests in difficult people. And I don't know, like the conversation was, I can't remember now because it was like an hour ago, and that's too far back for me apparently. But it was like between, does everyone have Buddha nature, or like do we wish for them to gain Buddha nature or realize their Buddha nature? And like this just seems like a really good like slight translation of like what that Buddha nature might look like. It's just like one of the things that we all have, and you can rely on it or not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What is your experience of that source of creation?
It's really somatic for me. Like I
Mhm.
feel it. Um, it feels like the thing that I'm made of, like a liquid sort of substance, like blood or something, that is just like all of my matter. Like that's, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but that's what it feels like. That's my experience of it. And it manifests in different ways. And it's like really easy to tell if I'm like making decisions, or like decisions like moving my arm or not, like that small of decisions, whether they're in a line with it or not. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's interesting. I'm going to think more about that.
Mhm. And I bet if we gave everybody a chance to speak to their experience of their own personal experience of that source of creation, like we'd get a different set of words coming from each person.
There was also something, I was at the Oregon State Penitentiary last night,
Mhm.
and one of the inmates, we were also talking about Buddha nature there, and everyone had like I don't know, like a take on it, like an idea of what it is. And there was one guy who like it just really struck me. He like closed his eyes and was uh, like this, and like he didn't put any more words to it, but I just like felt it, and like my eyes watered up, and it was so like powerful. Um, like he said he knows who he is when he's sitting zazen, and
Mm.
I don't know.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story.
The source of creation line sort of jumped out at me too, and I tripped over a little bit. It triggered some Christian thoughts, and so I just sort of filed that away, like,
Mhm.
it's mildly triggering, very mildly.
I immediately went to artistic creativity.
Yeah, I guess I kind of did too. And the feeling in your body when you're experiencing it. And then I'm just kind of remembering, um, like if I'm out running, I just kind of have a distinct memory of being out running and just feeling kind of in my, kind of it starting in my belly, I guess, and just like this, and then just kind of going up into my head and just being like, oh, I could do, just that's something I could do, or what, just if I'm having a creative thought or something. But yeah, it is a very distinct bodily feeling for sure.
And I was
A lot
thinking,
of-
go ahead.
Penny.
Well, I was just thinking the source of creation is into our intuition, our that we can get in touch with when we're meditating, but when and other times too, when I don't know, that's kind of what hit me with the source of creation.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing all those different ways of describing it. And practice definitely points us towards experience. So less concepts and more experience. So when we're trying to describe experience, we're taking something somatic, something feeling, and trying to put words on it, which is always somewhat limiting. We'll always miss the mark a little bit. There'll always be a little bit of like, oh, those aren't quite the right words. But at the same time, we can also recognize when others are experiencing without needing words. Like Sage, when you were talking about the person that you were talking with the other night or last night, the way he composed his body and turned inward, you recognize something. So there are times when we access these aspects of self, these aspects of practice that even if we can't name them, are still recognizable. And that can be very powerful. That is one of the joys of sitting with other people, is sitting next to someone and realizing how still they are. Who knows if, what their mind is doing. Oftentimes we say we still the body to help quiet the mind. And when someone is just sitting so still and so solid, it's noticeable. And it's easy to connect with, and it's easy for ourselves to come in line with that stillness and that solidity. Other thoughts? We're almost out of time.
I have a technical question. What's easy actually tonight was listening to this beautiful presentation. What is the author's name that did the translation of Cultivating the Empty Field?
The author, well, it was written by Hongzhi and translated by Taigen Dan Leighton.
Lincoln? Okay. I just want to be able to find it.
I'll spell it for you. Leighton.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. What a beautiful talk at this, about everything, this time of the year and in the solstice, and just the beautiful poetry of his words for all of us right now. Thanks.
You're welcome. I don't know about you all, but I'm okay with ending a few minutes early. Sound good? Okay. The universe is the boundless sky, just as the lotus is not wetted by the water that surrounds it. The mind is immaculate and beyond the dust. Let us bow to the highest Lord. all Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. Thank you all.